After their defeat in World War I, the punishing terms of the Treaty of Versailles, global industrial power is limited to an army of only 100,000 men.
The year is 1943. While war raged across Europe, Nazi Germany was secretly producing inventions that went far beyond weapons. From Fanta to Adidas, from the world's first assault rifle to the Volkswagen Beetle.
The Beetle, the most popular car of all time.
These creations were born in the shadows of the Third Reich. Some fueled destruction. Others quietly shaped modern life in ways few realize today. These are the most unexpected inventions Nazi Germany left behind in World War II. Fanta. Let's start with the orange-flavored soft drink that everyone drinks. Although we all drink Fanta, you won't have guessed that it comes from Nazi Germany in World War II. In the height of World War II, in 1940–41, Germany was dealing with shortages. Trade embargoes and logistical blockages made it impossible for Coca-Cola Deutschland to import the syrup and flavoring compounds required to produce their famous cola. Under these pressures, Max Keith, then the head of the German Coca-Cola subsidiary, faced a crisis: either shut down operations or invent something new. He chose the latter. Keith gathered his chemists and asked them to scrounge together whatever raw, local ingredients they could lay hands on. The result was a soda made from leftovers of leftovers, including whey, the watery byproduct of cheese production, apple pomace or fiber left over from cider pressing, beet sugar, and fruit scraps. The early version was closer to a lightly fruity, pale beverage than the bright orange soda known today, and at times, Germans even used it to sweeten soups and stews since the normal sweeteners were tight. As the resources dried up, Keith didn't only need a formula, but also a name. He challenged his team to let their fantasy, German for imagination, run wild. One salesman, Joe Nip, immediately exclaimed, "Fanta," and the name stuck. During wartime, Fanta was a surprising commercial success, selling about 3 million cases by 1943. But after the war, since Fanta was invented in Nazi Germany, the drink's origin became a point of controversy and corporate distancing. But the story didn't end with war. In 1955, Coca-Cola reintroduced Fanta in Italy with a new orange flavor. And as the brand expanded globally, no one remembered its wartime roots. Volkswagen Beetle. After the wartime soda shock of Fanta, an imaginative workaround born from scarcity, something even more ambitious emerged: a car designed to put everyday Germans on the road. This was the Volkswagen Beetle, probably the most iconic, unexpected invention to come out of Nazi Germany. What we know today as the VW Beetle wasn't first a pop culture darling, but a political and engineering project wrapped inside Nazi Germany's propaganda ambitions. In 1933–34, Adolf Hitler issued a mandate that Germany needed a car for the people, affordable and efficient, capable of carrying 2 adults and 3 children. It was meant to run economically and be built in sufficient numbers to be accessible to ordinary families. Soon, Ferdinand Porsche and his team took up the challenge. They made the Type 1 concept, which we now call the Beetle. But even before Porsche's design, there were engineers like Josef Ganz and Austro-Hungarian Bela Barenyi, who had sketched out small, economical, people's car prototypes, which were little vehicles with rear engines, streamlined shapes, and affordability in mind. Some of their ideas influenced Porsche's work. During the war, the Beetle was known as the KDF Wagen, meaning Kraft Dutch Freude, which was strength through joy in English. It wasn't fully realized for civilian mass production during the war. With the outbreak of World War I, the Volkswagen factory near Fallersleben decided to shift gears. It was supposed to be a democratizing mobility project, but became a war industry, producing military vehicles, using forced labor, and halting civilian deliveries. In terms of technology, the Beetle emerged with different innovations of its time. It had an air-cooled rear engine, which was simpler and less prone to freezing in winter or leaking coolant, streamlined bodywork to reduce drag, robust construction for rough roads, and a design geared toward ease of maintenance. These features helped it survive beyond the war and lasted decades as a staple of affordable, reliable transport. After the war, the Beetle shed much of its Nazi symbolism and eventually became a global success. Families from Los Angeles to Tokyo identified with it, hippies painted peace signs on it, and its shape became embedded in postcards, posters, and pop songs. Many people wouldn't have guessed that it comes from Nazi Germany. Adidas and Puma. From the sleek curves of the Beetle, let's move to something more grounded underfoot: shoes. Some of your favorite designer shoes carry a unique history. In Nazi Germany, even sport footwear carried unexpected invention, transformation, and moral ambiguity. Enter the Dassler brothers, Adolf and Rudolf, creators of what would become Adidas and Puma. The story begins in Herzogenaurach, Bavaria, where in 1924, Adolf and Rudolf Dassler founded the Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory. Early on, the brothers innovated athletic shoes that stood out with hand-sewn spikes and lightweight soles. They were sold to track athletes, especially those at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, when Jesse Owens raced away with 4 gold medals in Dassler spikes. The brothers' reputation soared. When the Nazi regime strengthened, sport and physical culture became a part of propaganda and ideology. The Dasslers joined the Nazi Party in 1933. Adolf Dassler was a part of the Hitler Youth, supplying shoes and coaching, while Rudolf was more openly supportive of the movement. But the real twist comes during the war. In 1943, Hitler's regime decreed that civilian shoe production should stop. The Dassler factory was changed to support the war effort. So, instead of crafting track spikes or leather boots, the workers were welding and assembling anti-tank weapons like the Tank Terror, a simple but fearsome shoulder-launched rocket launcher. The shoemakers became weapon makers, and even women who sewed leather were retrained to weld metal, leading to forced labor. The war also strained the relationship between the two brothers. Due to the business pressures, political differences, and personal rivalries, they split up in 1948. Adolf retained half of the business and formed Adidas, officially registered in 1949. But Rudolf formed his own company, initially called Ruder, which later became Puma. Adidas went on to survive and embrace innovation even when materials were scarce. He experimented post-war with unusual resources like rubber from defunct vehicles, tent canvas, and leather from surplus military stock. It was during this time that the 3-stripe logo emerged. Puma also grew and was rooted in rivalry, marketing, bold designs, and athletes. Jerry Can. If trainers and propaganda shaped morale, then fuel shaped everything else in Nazi Germany. The Jerry Can was one of those silent, unglamorous inventions that ended up making a huge difference, even more than some of the most flashy weapons. Before the complexity of jets or the marketing wars of footwear, the Wehrmacht was already thinking about something simpler, which was how to move fuel securely, quickly, and without waste. In 1937, German engineer Vinzenz Grünvogel at Müller engineering firm in Schwelm designed what became the Wehrmacht Einheitskanister. This literally means the Armed Forces Standard Canister. It was a 20-liter pressed steel fuel container, robust and efficient, and built to precise specification by the German military. What made the canister so unexpectedly brilliant was how many small design details were engineered for real battlefield conditions. It had triple handles, so one soldier could carry 2 full cans or 4 empty ones. Its shape was rectangular and flat-sided, so it could be stacked neatly in trucks, in trains, or in supply depots. The recessed welded seams boosted strength and protected against knocks and impacts, while the sides had stamped indentations that stiffened the walls, preventing warpage or rupture under rough handling. For fast refueling, its large spout and flip-top closure allowed quicker filling and draining than older screw-top tins. Inside, a dip-coated paint layer helped protect the steel from corrosion. By 1938, the German military had stockpiled thousands of these cans to prepare for the war. They became central to the Blitzkrieg's fuel supply lines. In fact, without efficient, reliable fuel storage and transport, the military won't have been able to advance across the borders. And the design's influence didn't stop with Germany. Once the Allies captured some of these cans during early campaigns, especially in Norway and North Africa, they were quick to recognize how superior they were to the leaky, awkward fuel tins, often called flimsies, in use by British and American troops. Before they knew it, they had copied and adopted the German designs throughout their supply chains. Although the jerry can was a silent contribution, the next Nazi Germany invention is something we see every 4 years: Olympic torch relay and torch design. The Olympic torch relay, along with the iconic torch design used in the first modern relay, is one of the surprising inventions that came from Nazi Germany. Until 1936, there was no Olympic torch relay in the modern games. The flame might have been lit, but the idea of carrying it from Olympia, Greece, to the host city was invented for the 1936 Berlin Olympics under the Nazi regime. It was engineered as a grand theatrical display, a symbol connecting the Third Reich with ancient Greece's mythic prestige. The relay started on July 20, 1946, at Olympia. A German-made Zeiss parabolic mirror was used to focus the sun's rays and ignite the flame. It was a classical ritual, yet modern both in design and intention. From there, some 3,300 torchbearers carried the flame across 7 countries: Greece, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Germany, over more than 3,000 kilometers, arriving in Berlin for the opening ceremony. The torch itself was a work of engineering. Designed by sculptor Walter Lemke and manufactured by Krupp, a steel and armament giant, it combined wood and metal. It had 2 fuses, so it could stay lit even in rain, wind, or damp weather. Engineers made sure the torch burned long enough, about 10 minutes per bearer leg, so the flame wouldn't extinguish midway. On the grip or lower handle of each torch, the relay route from Olympia to Berlin was engraved, along with inscriptions such as Fackelstaffel Lauf, Olympia Berlin, 1936, which meant torch relay, run Olympia Berlin, 1936, and tributes like In Gratitude to the Bearer. These details made the torch a portable artifact of propaganda and identity. The relay was also used as a propaganda tool. There was widespread media coverage as the relay was filmed, documented by radio, posters, and ceremonies in every border and stopover city. Today, the torch relay is a symbol of peace and unity, and no one realizes that it was rooted in Nazi Germany. Messerschmitt Me 262. Although Nazi Germany made a lot of positive inventions, this didn't last forever. as World War II approached, and they changed the nature of air combat forever. The Messerschmitt Me 262 was a major technological leap, the first ever operational jet-powered fighter that came as with the urgency of a war Germany was already losing. The Me 262, initially known as Project 1065 or P1065, was already under development in 1939, even before the full scale of World War XI engulfed Europe. The initial idea was a jet fighter with endurance, speed, and cutting-edge performance, demanding a speed past 530 miles per hour and capable of flying 1 hour without refueling. But from the start, there were many setbacks during the program. The jet engines, especially the BMW 003 and the now selected Junkers Jumo 004, were technologically ambitious but also unreliable. The metallurgical limits meant that the heat-resistant alloys were scarce or of poor quality. There were compressor problems, flameouts, and high maintenance needs which affected its progress. Internal politics and interference made the situation worse. Many in the Luftwaffe and German High Command only believed in conventional, propeller-driven fighters to win the war. Hermann Göring famously cut funding for jet engine R and D early on. Hitler even intervened. Although the Me 262 was meant to be a fighter, Hitler pressed for its adaptation as a fast bomber. He ended up diverting resources, delaying production, and arguably reducing its effectiveness as an interceptor. By early 1944, production ramped up. The specs were mostly finalized, airframes were built, and the armed squadrons had been formed. But the Me 262 arrived at the war too late to turn the tide. Only a fraction of those built saw combat. Fewer than 1,500 aircraft produced, and many more lost on the ground or during takeoff and landing due to Allied bombing or logistical failures. Its performance was impressive, and it outmatched almost every Allied propeller aircraft. But the first ever operational jet-powered fighter wasn't the only life-changing invention from Nazi Germany. Its innovations reached into the operating theater. Intramedullary rod. The story of the intramedullary rod begins with Gerhard Kunscher, a German surgeon, who in 1939 came up with what he called the Kunscher nail. He introduced this internal fixation device to treat long bone fractures, especially of the femur, by inserting a steel rod into the hollow canal or medullary cavity of the bone. In that era, broken femurs were traditionally treated by weeks or even months of enforced immobility, like plaster casts or traction. So the Kunscher method was life-changing. Instead of immobilizing from the outside, the rod supported the bone from within. Soldiers treated this way could stand, walk, and return to duty much quickly. Early forms of the nail had simpler cross-sections, triangular or V-shaped, but Kunscher's design evolved. A later version used a cloverleaf cross-section that improved rotational stability in the bone. At first, the military was slow to accept the idea. In 1940, when Kunscher first presented the method, many German surgeons and military medical officials resisted, as they were worried about infection, damage to blood supply, and any unknown risks. But the casualties mounted and fractures piled up during the war, and they had no choice but to try it out. By 1942, the German military formally adopted it, and in practice, it allowed for wounded soldiers to recover mobility much faster than they could with the older methods. Even after the war, the ripple effects were profound. Even when Allied prisoners of war returned, they had the Kunscher nails in their bones, causing the technique to spread globally. There have also been improvements like locking nails, which have bolts at ends to control rotation and alignment. The Nazi didn't only focus on protecting their soldiers from injuries, but also their propaganda, which was the basis of the regime. Magnetophone. The magnetophone wasn't a weapon of war, but it became a formidable instrument in the Nazi arsenal of influence. It was Germany's reel-to-reel tape recorder, developed in the 1930s by AEG in collaboration with BASF and the Reich's radio establishment, RRG. Its roots trace back to Fritz Fleumer's 1928 patent for a strip of paper tape coated with magnetic particles, a paper and iron oxide medium that could record sound as variations in magnetic fields. From there, companies refined the tape itself and the machines to use it. In 1935, AEG debuted the K1 magnetophone at the Berlin Radio Show, alongside a new magnetic tape product. This was the first commercially demonstrated practical tape recorder, using the early black iron oxide tape. Although it was primitive compared to later standards, it wowed a lot of listeners by enabling longer recordings, portability, and playback fidelity. Surprisingly, another important and unexpected innovation came out by accident. This was the high-frequency AC biasing. In 1940–41, engineers Walter Weber and Hans-Joachim von Braunmühl discovered that adding an inaudible, high-frequency alternating current during recording. It really increased the sound quality of magnetophone, reducing distortion, hiss, and other imperfections in the sound. In the war years, the Nazis used magnetophone machines for propaganda, recordings of speeches and concerts, and radio broadcasts. These recordings were sometimes passed off as live because magnetophone could maintain that illusion. People's receiver. The magnetophone wasn't the only tool for Nazi propaganda. With the people's receiver, which they called Volksempfänger, their information was spread to every home. It was Nazi Germany's radio, made cheap and simple so that propaganda could reach the masses. Introduced in 1933 at Joseph Goebbels' request, the Volksempfänger 5E301 was engineered by Otto Griesing to be affordable, standardized, and widespread. Its purpose wasn't technical brilliance, but ideological power. It was government-subsidized and sold at a fraction of the price of other radios. The design cut costs by excluding shortwave bands and simplifying components. The name VE301 was also symbolic. VE stood for Volksempfänger, and 301 referred to January 30th, 1933, the day Hitler assumed power. Around 100,000 units sold out almost immediately at the Berlin Radio Show. Within a few years, millions more were in homes across Germany. By 1941, nearly 2/3 of households had one. What made this especially potent was how it was used. Goebbels ensured that the radio content was tightly controlled. There were only state-approved broadcasts, speeches, and patriotic music. Foreign stations were discouraged or blocked. The Volksempfänger turned live broadcasts into instruments of centralized messaging, eliminating many domestic barriers between propaganda and the people's daily life. Night vision devices. After cracking into living rooms through radio waves and speakers, Nazi Germany turned its focus to one of the darkest challenges of war: seeing in the night. What emerged were some of the first-ever military-grade night vision systems. Although the first ones were bulky and limited, it was very useful to the military. One of the most notable systems was the Zielgerät 122 Vampire, developed in 1943–44 by AEG and the Reich Post Office, built by Ernst Leitz. The Vampire was an active infrared rifle scope, paired with the STG-44 assault rifle. It weighed around 2.25 kilograms just for the scope and required a large battery cap and another smaller battery housed in a gas mask container to power its image converter. Only about 301 units were made, reaching the front lines in 1945. At the vehicle level, there was the FG-1250, also called Fahr- und Zielgerät FG-1250, or driving and aiming device. It was developed from 1941 with Carl Zeiss AG and others, and combined an infrared searchlight and image converter to allow Panther tanks and a few other armored vehicles to detect targets at night. It needed generators or batteries and involved modifications to the tanks to accommodate the equipment. Although these devices were sophisticated, these devices had serious limitations, with a heavy weight, short effective range, massive power demands, and visibility of the IR light itself. But they arrived too late in the war to alter the course in any meaningful way. Pervitin. And finally, we have Pervitin, Nazi Germany's hidden engine of speed, alertness, and desperate energy. It was a methamphetamine drug introduced by the Temmler Pharmaceutical Company in 1937 as a legal stimulant. It was marketed to civilians like workers, housewives, and night shift laborers as it sharpened focus and banished fatigue. But as the war worsened, the role of the drug loomed. German military doctors like Otto Friedrich Ranke saw Pervitin as a tool for combat. It was a pill that could let soldiers stay awake, march long hours, and push past human limits. After early testing on university students, it was distributed widely in 1939 to 1940. Between April and July 1940, over 35 million tablets were supplied to troops during the invasions of Poland and France. Used under the stimulant decree, Pervitin allowed troops to speed forward without rest, enabling blitzkrieg tactics, rapid advances, and night operations. It masked hunger, suppressed the need for sleep, dulled feelings of pain, and raised risk-taking. But the drug also carried some consequences. Addiction, physical and psychological, started surfacing by 1941 to 1942. Authorities tried to restrict the use of the drug due to this. From soft drinks to jet fighters, these Nazi inventions left a mark that still lingers today. Which one surprised you most? And should their legacy be remembered or erased? Let's know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.